Hi everyone. So we left off with Ruth 2, verse 2. So I'm gonna just continue with Ruth 3. So it, in Ruth 2 it begins with this kind of introduction, and look how fast the time moves. It's a very short, dense book, right? And so maybe supposed to mimic the kind of again a kind of cyclical cycle, right? Where the harvest, things are about to come to harvest, and of course, when things come to be ready, time moves very quickly, right? Okay, so it has some of that feel to it. Okay, so verse 3. So after getting permission from Naomi to go glean, right? And they, what I forgot to mention was notice not only Ruth's polite stance towards Naomi, right? And of course, her actions will be described as also demonstrative of hesed, right? This kind of appropriate behavior, right? This loyalty. But notice also that it's not clear how they were eating beforehand. Okay, so like I said in the first kind of set of videos, we kind of miss some of the tone of this text, right? Because we live in a society where there is lots of food. Okay, but really, the fact that she is asking permission to glean from Naomi might mean, because of course we're going to find out shortly, that gleaning was not a kind of neutral activity, right? It exposed you to particular dangers, especially as a young woman, right? Who didn't have a male protector. The fact that she asked for permission and waits this long to go glean food might be, again, that they're kind of slowly starving, right? And they kind of reach the limits of that being hungry, right? When they can't take it anymore, being hungry, she asked for permission to now go kind of, almost, glean food, that is to get food from, the way that poor folks might get food. Okay. Okay, so going onwards in verse 3. So after getting permission, vatelek, vatavo, vatalakhet, basadeh. So a string of verbs, right? All in the va consecutive imperfect. And so she went, halak again, right? And she came. Okay, maybe there's a better word than she came, and she went and she, okay, fine. And she went and she came, okay, and she gleaned, right, in the field. Okay, and maybe the string of verbs, sometimes it doesn't mean anything, but it can also indicate how active Ruth is. And as you'll find out in the description of Ruth by the servant of Boaz that's coming up, Ruth is almost a kind of a symbol of, I guess, whatever, a demonstration of this kind of wise woman, this good woman that's talked about at the end of the book of Proverbs, one who is always doing something for the welfare of her family. She's always active. She's not AKA she's not lazy. Okay. So she went and she came and she gleaned, right? And this is, notice the short prefix on this word here, this verb that I've asked you to parse. Vatalakhet, right? Notice also the doubling in the second consonant. What has a short prefix and doubling in the second consonant? This is a PL. Okay, va consecutive PL imperfect because of the prefix, right? And of course, the subject is Ruth, so that should tell you this is third feminine singular. Again, Ruth, the book of Ruth, is interesting and odd and unique for its use of feminine verbs, right? You don't find that very often. So she is, you almost get the sense that she immediately after getting permission, again, maybe speaking to how impoverished and poor and hungry they are, immediately gets to work, starts gathering food, okay? So she comes to the field, ahare hakatsurim, okay, after or behind, right, the harvesters or the reapers, okay. Katsar means to cut. Obviously it's talking about people that are cutting these sheaves of, I don't know that much about agriculture, whatever, these sheaves of corn or wheat or so these are the cutters or the reapers, okay? Therefore, metaphorically, katsar, right, it can mean to cut, it can have this kind of metaphoric meaning of being impatient, right? And like I said, what's interesting about Ruth is that the story moves quite quickly. It's only 4 chapters. right? Like there's lots of action in those 4 chapters, right? Almost as if to mimic the kind of katsarim. The harvest is, the vegetables have been produced. Okay, and so now you have to get to work, gathering them. Okay, I do not know that much about farming. Okay, all right. And notice with katsarim, it says, I have asked you to parse it, which should tell you this is a verb, but notice how it has noun endings, right? It has a definite article, ha, the, right? It also has this noun ending, im, right? And what verb tense functions as kind of a noun, a verb? Well, this is your participle, right? So this is a call participle from katsar, right? Kof sade resh, right? The im is this masculine plural ending. Okay, so she is now kind of immediately gets to work, gleaning behind the reapers or the harvesters, right? And now this 2 words that I've highlighted, vayikre, right? Sorry, vayiker mikreha. Okay, and this, there's lots of ways to translate this, right? Kof resh hey, which is, what is the tri-consonantal root that underlies this word, right? And notice the repetition, right? And you'll see this in Hebrew sometimes. He dreamed a dream. Okay, he vowed a vow. Okay, it's the same thing here, right? And kara means to kof resh hey means to occur, to happen. Right? And so literally it says, and it happened a happening, right? But of course you wouldn't say like, hey, but that's like not very nice translation. I would go with it so happened, and it so happened that, or a lot, and by luck, right? I mean, you almost have the sense, right? And you could tell that the writer is winking here, right? Because of course, in the biblical text, there is no it just so happened, right? Everything, I mean, this is this is traditional stories, right? There is no happenstance. Everything happens for a reason. So you can tell that the writers are winking at you. Oh, it just so happened, like, yeah, right. This is perhaps you were supposed to see in this, not just something randomly happening, but of course, right, the insinuation is this is the hand of God coming in to now save this family, right, or Ruth. Okay. So, but you can go with whatever translation you like. It so happened that, or it happened a happening, which again, I don't love that, right? Helkat hasadeh leboaz, okay, asher mi mishpachat Elimelech. And it so happened that the portion, and halak means also to kind of divide a portion, okay? It so happened that the portion of the field, hasadeh, it belonged to Boaz. And who is Boaz? Oh, in case you've forgotten, though it's told you like 15 times, right? Oh, it so happened that the portion of the field that Ruth was gleaning in, I mean, you got to kind of fill that in, belonged to Boaz, who, by the way, was from Mishpahat, from the family of Elimelech. Okay, so again, notice the emphasis, right, on how Boaz is the perfect guy. Notice with Yikre Mikreha, right, this emphasis on not happenstance, the opposite of happenstance, right? God is setting up a kind of meet cute, okay, and that's what the writers are trying to tell you, right, by telling you this Yikre Mikreha. Okay. Oh, and it so happened that she was gleaning in the field of this guy who's perfect for her, because not only is he rich and young and fertile, but he also happens to be just the right kin relationship to Ruth in a society where kin relationships are extremely important. Okay. Okay. Okay, now going forward, Vahine, Vahine Boaz ba mi beit lachem. Okay, so there's lots of like winking here, right? And now hine, I know that an intro, you are taught to translate hine as behold. Okay, this is an old translation. And you don't have to translate hine as behold, right? There are lots of translations of hine. sometimes it's to indicate a kind of surprise, right? The favorite example I like to give is, when Jacob works 7 years to marry Rachel, but instead, Rachel's father Laban switches the wives out, right? Switches the sisters, Rachel for Laban's older daughter Leah, whom Jacob somehow mistakenly sleeps with and marries, right? And we are told, the Hebrew says, now in the morning, Hine, it was Leah, right? Now behold, yes, it kind of works, in the morning, behold, it was, but really the more appropriate translation there would be, and in the morning, shit, it was Leah, right? So there's lots of, I don't know if that's the right translation here, but there's lots of translations of hine. Like I said, the great thing about knowing, how to, when you start, translating Hebrew, is that it gives you so much more of a range. You can really play with it. Okay, so here I would translate, not shit here, but, okay, vahine Boaz. And it has a lot of these happenstance words, right? Again, with the writers kind of winking at you. And it so happened, and oh, could it be, right? Would also be an appropriate translation. Could it be that now Boaz was coming at that very moment from Bethlehem? Okay, and so notice that Hine has a kind of surprising element to it, right? It has this another famous occurrence of the use of Hine is, of course, in Genesis 22 with the Akedah. You will see Hine kind of thrown in there with God kind of calling Abraham, 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 and it says Hine, or he says Hineni. Here I am is how it's usually translated, but there's this kind of surprise element to it that he's just kind of going along and oops, this happens. Okay, there's a surprise element here as well, right? And by the way, things are just kind of happening along, but then these sets of coincidences, i.e. not coincidences, keep happening. Okay, and it so happened. And by the way, by chance, Boaz was coming from Bethlehem at that exact moment. And why is this important? Because, of course, again, right, Boaz is about to meet, right, this kind of perfect person for him, right? Like I said, one way to read this is that this is kind of a divine meet cute, okay, God's setup of this couple, right, so that the family of Naomi will be saved. Okay, and by extension, maybe a symbol, Naomi's family being now the nation of Israel, right? If you're reading it kind of from an exilic point of view. Okay. So, Boaz is coming. This is actually in the participle. Whatever, you don't need to know that. Okay, though it looks exactly the same as the perfect. Okay. This is where context tells you what the tense of the verb is. Okay, so he's coming from Bethlehem, or the meme here is from. You can also translate it. And by that point, by chance, Boaz at that very moment was coming to Bethlehem, which makes more sense because they are in Bethlehem right now. But okay, so the meme, like I said, prepositions are a little dicey when you go from one language to another. Okay, so now your hero, I guess, or sub-hero, or the romantic, subsidiary character, I suppose, comes onto the scene. Okay, Vayomer lakotzarim Adonai imachem. Right, and so he shows up, and these are the first words out of Boaz's mouth, which is again supposed to give you a sense of this character, right? And he said, that is Boaz, to the reapers, to the harvesters, right? May Yahweh be with you, or Yahweh is with you. Okay, and of course, one way to read this is that this is a traditional greeting, Yahweh be with you. Okay, but of course, there's lots of double entendres, right? Notice that the first words out of this character's mouth is Yahweh is with you. Okay, and again, who is he referring to, right? And maybe there's a little bit of funniness here, right? Yahweh is indeed with the harvesters, right? How? In the form of Ruth, who is gleaning among them, right? And through whom God is working through. right? God is with you, or Yahweh is with you, is also interesting because, of course, this could be the you could be referring to, ironically, Boaz, right? Yahweh is going to use Boaz, work through Boaz, is with Boaz, right? To what? In some ways, bring this family of Naomi, back to life from death. Okay. This also could be, of course, Yahweh, Imachem. Yahweh is with you. Again, if you think this is exilic or certainly touched up in exilic, a kind of reassertion of the presence of Yahweh even among those who are what in the position of Naomi and Ruth, that is the audience, exiled, returning from exile, right? Destitute, okay, poor, hungry, right? There's lots of ways to extend who he is saying this to, okay? And of course, they reply back to him, right? And the reply back is also loaded with lots of different meanings, right? Vayomaru, and they said, lo, to him, Yovarechacha Adonai. Okay, this is very hard to pronounce. Okay, Barak. Okay, this is actually Barak, right? I do not think this is the name of Barack Obama, though there is confusion, right? If you change the kaf here to a kov, right? That's actually what's undernaming Barack Obama's name, and it means lightning, right? This means blessing. Okay, whatever, it doesn't. Okay, you could play with the words. Okay, so they said to him, may Yahweh bless you. Okay, and of course, what they say back to him is also quite interesting, right? Because what we know, right? We know how the audience knows how the story goes, right? We will, we know that the Lord indeed will bless Boaz, right, through Ruth, right? As God uses Boaz as a conduit of God's kind of larger blessing, to this particular family, and one would say to Israel in general, right? Especially since what God does here with Boaz and Ruth will lead to to David eventually, right? And David, insofar as becoming messianic, right, to the Messiah. Okay, so again, lots of kind of double entendres here. Okay, like I said, you can extend who this is being said to, right? May the Lord be with you, may the Lord bless you. Okay, notice how in some ways the first words out of Boaz's mouth in this kind of response reply, right? It kind of captures the message of Ruth in general, right? The Lord is with you. The Lord, may he bless you. Okay, and it's a kind of narrative drawing out of this kind of reply and response. Okay, or almost the hope that the Lord will draw out, will come, bring to fruition this reply and response. Okay. Okay, so should I do one more? Should I go? Okay, sure. Let's do that. Okay, so I'm going to go on to verse 5. Okay. Vayomaru Boaz la na'aro. And Boaz said, now after everyone said their greeting, now we're going back to business. And Boaz said to his, and Na'ar means his, like a young boy, like a teenager, but it can also mean to like a servant, right? And so, Boaz said to his servant, and now the description of the servant, Ha nitzav al hakatzarim, right? The one who is Nitzav in charge of, standing guard, the one in charge over the harvesters, the reapers. Okay, and this is, notice the ha here. Okay. So the one, so he's, he turns to the kind of overseer. Okay, his manager, I guess. Okay, and notice again, this is the second words out of Boaz's mouth, right? Telling you how the story is gonna go, right? Lamiha na'ara hazot, right? To whom, it literally says, to whom does that young lady, to whom is this young lady? Okay, and really what he's saying is, to whom does she belong, right? Which, to whom, meaning, whose husband, right? I mean, you would kind of, as unfortunately, as a woman, belong to a male, right? But there's other kind of nicer translations of this, and Boaz said to his overseer, the one in charge of his harvesters, who is that lady? right? Who is, I mean, I guess it's not appropriate to use chick, but you know, you almost get the sense, right? Who is that? Who is that young lady, or who is that chick, right? Who is that gal over there? Okay, you know, and again, how you translate this will nuance it in different ways, right? Is the fact that this is the second phrase out of his mouth is quite telling, right? Are we supposed to read this, right? By your translation, one of the things you can emphasize is that he's kind of looks around the field and like, you know, Ruth immediately catches his eye, right? Is that what's supposed to, it could be that she, you know, by the way that this is phrased, that he's not only asking who is that lady, right? But you know, ooh, and is she married at the same time, right? That he's saying both those questions, right? So one way to read it is that he is immediately interested in her, okay, or that she has immediately caught her eye, his eye. Okay. So now, if you read some of the, you know, not everybody is comfortable with that, right? So, so others may say, well, you know, he's just, you know, this is to show you what a good landlord or landowner he is, right? He keeps close track of who is in the field, in his field, and he immediately notices that somebody who wasn't there before is now there. I mean, maybe, although, you know, to that kind of, you know, kind of more platonic, I guess, translation, I would say, well, yeah, but this is a harvest scene, right? The whole thing is, you know, this kind of lush harvest, romantic, sexualized, you know, this is about the revival of a family, right? So, you know, I read it as something about her, you know, again, this is a kind of neat, cute, romantic tale. Something about her immediately catches his eyes. Okay, and of course, this is a setup for, again, you know, the story that will follow, right, where they will end up together with this, like, you know, son who's kind of held up like, you know, like the Lion King. Okay, so okay, so I'm going to stop there, and in the next video go on to the other verses.